All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Well, it finally happened, as after months of speculation, first baseman Pete Alonso is returning to the New York Mets. Last night, the Mets and Alonso agreed on a 2-year deal for 54 million with an opt-out after the season. Alonso is going to receive $30 million for the upcoming season, and 10 million of that is going to be a signing bonus. To me, this was a deal, plain and simple, that had to get done for both Alonso and the Mets. Is at the end of the day, he really didn't want to play anyplace else. Okay. We saw tense negotiations over the last couple of months between Mets president of baseball operations, David Stern, and Alonso's agent, Scott Boras. Now, Boras and Alonso, of course, never got the long term deal that they were seeking. And it makes you wonder, was it a mistake by Pete Alonso to pass on that extension that was offered to him by the Mets in 2023? At the end of the day, you look at it, and I'm going to say yes, because Boris and Alonso, they overplayed their hand. They thought there was going to be a market for Pete Alonso's services that just simply never came to fruition this offseason. I think it was going to be a 7, maybe an 8-year extension for Alonso with the Mets back in 2023. Of course, that was with Billy Epler running the front office. Of course, during that time, we saw Alonso switch agents and go with Scott Boras. And at the end of the day, Scott played hardball, but so did the New York Mets. And he just never simply got the long-term deal that he was seeking. And it really wasn't just the New York Mets; it was baseball as a whole. We saw the market, how it played out this offseason for the first base position, and the Mets were cognizant of that, and they simply were not going to bid against themselves for Pete Alonso. So you look at it; they had to accept a 2-year deal. He got the money, okay, at least for this year. But he just simply did not get the years. But looking and focusing on 2025, the Mets now have Alonso back in their lineup, and he should provide protection for the newly acquired Juan Soto while also giving this Mets lineup some depth. Of course, we saw the Mets get within 2 games of winning the National League pennant last year. We saw a talented lineup with a lot of youngsters come out and shine. We saw Pete Alonso didn't have his best year, but he still led the club in home runs with 34. Francisco Lindor had an MVP caliber season. The emerging Mark Vientos at third base, solid contributions from the likes of Brandon Nimmo as well. And of course, the Mets are hopeful that Juan Soto will now be the centerpiece of it all. But nonetheless, with Pete Alonso, he has a golden opportunity in front of him because now we're talking about he's within striking distance of the Mets all-time home run record. And you think about the Mets franchise. When you think about the Mets, they've always been highlighted by their pitching over the years. Okay. They've never really had the great hitting per se. They've had great hitters play for them, but the bulk of them have not played their entire careers. Of course, the Mets' all-time home run record is 252, which is held by Darryl Strawberry. And of course, Strawman spent the first 8 seasons of his big league career in the blue and orange before joining the Los Angeles Dodgers. He also spent time with the San Francisco Giants and New York Yankees. But nonetheless, 1990 is a long time ago, and that was the last time that Strawberry suited up for the New York Mets. This is year number 35 since then, and it looks like this is going to be the year that the Mets do have a new home run king for their franchise. Pete Alonso is sitting on 226 homers. You're talking about a guy for his 6 year MLB career, who has averaged 43 homers per season. So the numbers would indicate that yes, Pete Alonso is going to break that record. And of course, you have a Mets fan base that wants to see the record be broken. And on top of that, you have a veteran, like a Darryl Strawberry, who would love to see a new home run king, if you will, for the New York Mets. And of course, I guarantee you, Steve Cohen being Steve Cohen, he's going to market the heck out of that situation. But nonetheless, will Pete look to go out there and hit the market again next winter? I think he will. He has an opt out after this season. It's a $54 million deal with him getting 30 million this season. He's going to go out there and try to get another deal. It's probably not going to be the 7 or 8 year deal or the mega deal uh, that he and Boris were seeking this offseason, because clearly it never came to fruition. Why are you going to put yourself through that headache once again? He's probably going to have to simply accept the fact that it's probably going to be a 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 year deal that he could get from a team for next year, and it's probably not going to be the money that he's seeking either. But nonetheless, I think it's an opportunity for him to go ball out. But at the same time, he had that opportunity in 2024. His strikeout numbers were at 172 for the year. Granted, he did strike out 183 times as a rookie when he became the rookie of the year, and he became the first Met to hit 50 plus home runs in a season. Didn't have the RBI numbers last year. He only drove in 88, but he still had 34 runs batted in. But he is going to have the opportunity this year with Soto in that lineup, I think, to drive in runs. So it's going to be important for him to go out there and take care of his business. Money will be there, okay, but it's one of those where he just has to simply accept the fact that he unfortunately is never going to get that mega deal, if you will, that he's been coveting. But nonetheless, to me, in my opinion, this was a big time power move by Mets team owner Steve Cohen, as he was able to keep a fan favorite in Queens while also saving face. And I say this because Stearns and Cohen, they did not give in to Scott Boris. Okay. And it's one of those where Steve Cohen didn't overstep his grounds, as he stood by David Stearns during these tense negotiations. He allowed David Stearns to do his job. He did step in at the last minute and talk to Pete and say, hey, plain and simple, that they wanted him back in a Mets uniform. And at the end of the day, I truly do believe that Pete Alonso wanted to be with the Mets. But nonetheless, it's one of those where the Mets organization did not give in to Scott Boras, because we've seen over the years, when it comes to negotiations, Scott Boras always brings up that mystery team, if you will. And of course, there were rumors about the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm not sure what the offer was. But for me, at the end of the day, I think as this offseason continued to progress, and of course, pitchers and catchers are about to start reporting for spring training, more and more leverage went to the New York Mets, because we saw the first base jobs around Major League Baseball filling up. Okay. And Pete Alonso was still there. We saw the numbers that were being thrown around. We also saw the years that were being thrown around. And at the end of the day, to me, it meant more leverage for the Mets. There were a lot of teams out there that could have used Pete Alonso. And if they were going to go after him, and if he was going to get the mega deal that he was seeking, well, you know what? Plain and simple, he would have gotten it by now. And clearly he didn't. So, will there be any ill feelings in 2025 and going forward between the Mets and Pete Alonso? I don't think so, because my thing is, I truly do believe Pete Alonso wanted to be with the Mets. It was just a matter of him getting compensated in the way that he felt that he should have been compensated. That was not the case. It's a business. And I know that it could be frustrating for team. I'm sure it could be also be frustrating for player and agent, as they're going out there and trying to seek the money that they feel that they should get. But at the end of the day, like I said, I truly do feel that Pete Alonso wanted to be a Met uh, things are turning around with this organization, if you will, and they could be on the cusp of doing something very special. And I think if they are, at least for 2025, Pete Alonso definitely wants to be a part of that. More egg on the face of Scott Boras. I definitely think so because another one of his big clients strikes out on the open market. And, I asked this question before and I'll ask it again. Is Major League Baseball getting tired of Scott Boras? And to an extent, I'm going to say yes. We saw the mega contract that Juan Soto got this offseason from the Mets. But we've also seen a lot of Scott Boras's clients in recent years strike out on the open market. And I think a lot of teams around baseball are getting tired of Boras's negotiations. Also, they're getting tired of some of his guys not, living up after they got that big deal. Most notably and most recently, a guy that comes to mind is Chris Bryant. We're talking about a former MVP with the Chicago Cubs, helped them win a World Series, got that big time deal from the Colorado Rockies. And what has Chris Bryant done ever since? I think it's one of those between that, also the fact of, the luxury tax, and teams are really shying away from giving out those big time deals in free agency. Right now, it's all about signing the youngsters to the long extensions early. Okay. And even the small market teams can have these kids under control for as many years as possible in their system. So we're no longer really seeing the guys hit 29, 30, 31 years of age when they get the free agency and going out there and getting the 10, 12-year deals. I think that is a thing of the past in Major League Baseball. And unfortunately for a guy like Scott Boras, it's making him more and more obsolete. Now, I'm sure Boris was frustrated with the negotiations, but you never heard Boris come out and publicly criticize the Mets. You never really heard the Mets really come out and publicly criticize Scott Boras. Why? Because I truly do feel Steve Cohen likes Scott Boras and Scott Boras likes Steve Cohen. If you go back when Steve Cohen first purchased the Mets a couple of years ago, Scott Boras spoke of him glowingly. Why? Because he knew that this was a billionaire owner coming in with deep pockets who was going to be willing to spend money. And of course, if a guy is willing to spend money on his players, he and Scott Boras can't get along. We have seen Steve Cohen go out there and spend the coin on Scott Boras's clients. He recently did it with Juan Soto, of course. A couple of years ago, it was Max Scherzer. So it's one of those where Boras knows that he can continue to work with Steve Cohen in the coming years. And I think that they definitely will because Boras is going to continue to have top tier clients that he's going to go out there and market for the top dollar. That is his job. So I think they can and will continue to have a dynamic, if you will, working relationship going forward. But nonetheless, a lot of teams are kind of you know, Xing or phasing Scott Boras out of things because I truly do feel, as a whole at least, that Major League Baseball has gotten tired of him. But what type of a season can we expect Pete Alonso to have? There's going to be some ups and downs because we're not talking about a guy that's going to go out there and hit 275, 285 for his career. Or for the season. He simply has not shown that. He does have the potential to hit 40 home runs, and I do feel that he has a potential to be an important part still of a Mets lineup that is expected to build off of last season. The Mets are expected to be right there in the mix in the National League East and get to the postseason. That's going to be a tough division. I mean, you're talking about the Philadelphia Phillies, you're talking about the Atlanta Braves. I really do feel that the Washington Nationals will be an improved baseball team for the upcoming season. But New York is right in that mix, and I think this caps off, if you will, the re-signing of Pete Alonso. This caps off a very strong offseason for the Metropolitans. We saw them go out there and make a lot of moves. Of course, it was highlighted by re-signing or signing Juan Soto. They re-signed Sean Manaea. Also had other upgrades to their bullpen. So I'm looking at this Mets team, and of course, the expectations are there. But I think, like I've talked about before, it is a culture change under this organization with Steve Cohen. I'm not going to sit up there and pencil the Mets in to simply go out there and win a World Series. But Cohen has changed the culture around this team in a very short period of time. And it's a very interesting combo that is working for the Mets. You have an owner in Steve Cohen who is willing to spend the money, but you also have a president of baseball ops in David Stearns, who knows how to get the most out of lease. Because I say this because, of course, he was running things in the front office for the Milwaukee Brewers for quite some time, and of course, he was a big part of the Brewers' success there. So now you bring a guy in who knew how to do it on a budget with a guy who has unlimited resources, and they're finding a way to blend together. And I think this was a power move by David Stearns, as he completely didn't give in to Scott Boras, because if he did, Pete Alonso probably would have been signed by Christmas for more years and more money. And that was simply not the case. I truly do feel that Stearns and Cohen wanted him back, but they wanted him back, excuse me, at their price. So the expectations have changed for the Mets, but I think they're right there in the mix to make a run in the NL East, and of course, do even bigger and better things. I want to see how hungry this team comes back after their postseason run of last October. But nonetheless, um, Pete Alonso's back for the Mets, and it caps off a very strong offseason for this team. Now they can get ready for spring training. And of course, before you blink, we'll be talking about the beginning of the 2025 MLB season. Expectations have changed for the New York Mets. A lot of big names in this lineup. Pete Alonso is one of them. What's going to happen in Queens this summer? Only time will tell. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.